One of the first keys I've learned is figure out what's triggering it. Is it the gut? Have you been exposed to a virus? Have you been exposed to a bacteria? Is there a bad bacteria living in your gut, residing in the gut? So I'm going to be talking about a lab test we do, like GI map or GI effects test from Genova, which is a good test to see what the microbiome. That's where most of your, 2/3 of your immune system right here in the gut.
Hey, this is Dr. Colbert's broadcast, and I'm Kyle Colbert. I'm here with my dad, Dr. Don Colbert, and we are talking about autoimmune disease. Dad, we want to know, what do we do about autoimmune disease, which encompasses over 100 different diseases? So
exactly. It's very confusing. And again, I experienced this firsthand over 35 years ago when I was diagnosed with, I'll never forget, the dermatologist looked down over his glasses and said, Don, shook his head, I'm sorry to tell you, you have the, and he emphasized the word, heartbreak of psoriasis. And I laughed. I said, forget that. I've not had my heart broken, and no one in my family has psoriasis. I don't have this. He said, yes, you do. And so again, I had to figure out what to do to overcome it, but I overcame it. And then I've taught many of my patients what to do to overcome their autoimmune disease, but it's taken me decades to put all this together, but it's easy once you understand it.
Well, that's the key, is when that doctor said the heartbreak, what I thought is he probably didn't think you'd ever find an answer.
Yeah, you're right.
He's thinking traditionally, you're
going to... there's a strong emotional component to it.
We want to hear about that.
And again, we're going to talk about that later, because there is a very strong emotional component. Stress is a strong emotional component to it. Self-hatred, or if a person has trapped trauma, such as if a person has rejection, betrayal, abandonment, if they have unforgiveness, if they have guilt, shame, blame, addictions, trauma, it literally sets them up for an autoimmune disease.
And those things are running rampant.
Oh, they're rampant.
We're in a dying, this is a dying world.
Oh, it is. Absolutely.
But
we are commanded to walk in love. When you walk in love, all these deadly emotions go by the wayside.
Fruits of the Spirit.
Yes, and we're going to have a whole series on walking in love, doing the love walk. We're going to teach everyone how to do it. And I've got a book coming out this next year on how to do it.
It's amazing. You've come full circle, starting on medicine, going to nutrition, and now going to the spiritual component.
The spiritual is the key to everything. It is the key. Now, again, it's important to live a fasted life. And we're going to be talking about food triggers, or what's your kryptonite that triggers your autoimmune disease. See, I'm talking about not just one, not just psoriasis. This actually applies to every autoimmune disease. And we've talked about a bunch of them. Now, I may not have mentioned yours. You may have some rare ones. You may say, I have pemphigus. I've treated that, and we've overcome that too without meds, which is amazing. But one of the first keys I've learned is figure out what's triggering it. Is it the gut? Have you been exposed to a virus? Have you been exposed to a bacteria? Is there a bad bacteria living in your gut, residing in the gut? So I'm going to be talking about a lab test we do, like GI map or GI effects test from Genova, which is a good test to see what the microbiome. That's where most of your, 2/3 of your immune system right here in the gut. And all in autoimmune disease is a confused immune system that starts attacking itself.
I like that term. It's a confused immune system.
It's confused.
And you got to help.
That's not the author of confusion.
He's not.
He's the author of peace, but we got to quit eating our kryptonite.
So for your kryptonite was the paprika, the salsa, the tomatoes.
Well, number one, gluten. Gluten was my worst kryptonite. Number two, nightshades. Tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, paprika, and peppers, any kind of peppers.
Well, what are typical kryptonites for other?
Those are the main ones we're going to talk about.
Those are for everybody.
These are the kryptonite for autoimmune disease I'm going to talk about. Wow. It just so happens that when you eat these nightshades, they increase this powerful cytokine, inflammatory marker called tumor necrosis factor alpha. And that's why people are using all these biologic meds to treat all of these autoimmune diseases, such as Humira, Enbrel, Remicade. All of these are lowering that tumor necrosis factor alpha. Well, if we can just decrease these nightshades, we're doing the same thing. Because you're eating your kryptonite. People say, but you don't understand. I'll never forget this lady who came to see me. Horrible rheumatoid arthritis. She was on methotrexate, but she was a pharmaceutical rep. And she traveled all over the place, and she would eat out a lot. And you know what her favorite food was?
Nightshades.
Tomatoes. And I said, well, you don't mind giving up tomatoes. And you know what? She literally started crying. She says, I can't give them up. I love them too much. I said, we're just taking methotrexate.
Oh, wow.
But now we know that if you remove the lectins from the tomatoes and the peppers, how do you do that?
How do you do that?
All you do is you get a pot of boiling water. You throw the tomato or the pepper in the pot of boiling water for 1 minute, and then the skin peels right off. You just remove most all your lectins. Then you de-seed them.
Wow.
And then almost all 90+% of your lectins are gone.
So you don't have to tell people they have to lay that down on the altar for the rest of their life. They just have to prepare it a little different.
Exactly.
That's it.
Now, it's interesting that a lot of the tomatoes from Italy, they learned this in Italy, and a lot of the food companies in Italy prepare their tomatoes like that. So they peel them and de-seed them. So it's already done for you. So if you get foods made from Italy, a lot of the nightshades from Italy, they've already done that for you.
So these are some of the foods that can trigger these autoimmune diseases. You also mentioned it could be viruses triggering, it could be bacteria.
In the gut, but not bacteria living in the gut. That's the key. And so we have to do usually some gut testing, like the GI map or the GI effects, to identify those bad boys that are living in your gut.
And once they identify it,
and we kill them usually. And how do you kill them? Natural means usually we'll use like the special form of oregano that kills bacteria, or we can use golden seal or berberine. And these are natural things that kill these bad bugs.
Wow,
and they will test for that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm familiar with berberine, and so I know that was...
Well, berberine's used for lowering blood sugar.
That's what I'm familiar with.
It's also used for gut health. But we've talked about, viruses and bacteria. Let's talk about the gut.
Yes.
The gut is fascinating. That's why I wrote the book, The Healthy Gut Zone. This is where 2/3 your immune system is. And so what happens when that immune system gets confused, your body starts attacking certain organs. If it's your thyroid, you have either Graves' disease, where it's hyperthyroid, or if it's Hashimoto's, you have hypothyroid. If it's your joints, it's usually lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis. If it's your gut, it's many times Crohn's, which affects your terminal ileum and your rectum, or it's ulcerative colitis, which affects your entire colon, and that's a horrible disease. So again, the gut is the key. Now, what happens is the gut, and I want to show you a picture, if you can zero in on this picture right here. We have this brush border. It's 1 cell thick in our small intestines right here. If you can, you may not be able to see that. Can you?
We could probably take a picture of it and we'll put it on the screen.
Okay, good. We'll put it on the screen. Okay, this is on page 27, but it shows the brush border. Now I'll show you with my fingers. The brush border is 1 cell thick. Mm-hmm. Now this is the most amazing membrane. It's a semi-permeable membrane. So it's made of these 1 cell thick, but are like finger projections like this, and they have tight junctions between them. Now, what happens is it literally enables your body to absorb the nutrients, but it has to be simple sugars like glucose or fructose, and simple fatty acids and simple amino acids. It can't be peptides and proteins. It can't be large fats. It can't be complex carbs or starches. It has to be simple sugar, simple fatty acids, simple amino acids, vitamins, minerals, but it also blocks out partially digested food, large food particles, peptides, because they can form reactions on the gut lining. And the reactions create inflammation. It cuts out the carbs, it cuts out the larger sugars, the larger fatty acids. And so what happens though, when we're exposed to antibiotics, or when we're exposed to, ibuprofen, naproxen, aspirin, it starts to create holes in the lining of the gut. And when we eat certain foods like gluten is specific and causing these tight junctions to open up. So instead of the cells being tight junctions, preventing these partially digested food particles from coming in, they start to open. And you get the tight junctions like that. They open up. And so then we start developing what we call a leaky gut, or increased intestinal permeability. When the gut does not work as a semi-permeable membrane, but lets in everyone, just like at our southern border, where all these terrorists are coming in, where all these gangs of criminals are coming in, then all of a sudden what happens is we start to get inflammation in our gut lining, inflammation in our liver, inflammation in the blood-brain barrier, and autoimmune disease starts to occur. So the best way to look at it is this. Picture a coffee filter. Now see that coffee filter, and you have the coffee grounds in the filter. You put it in the coffee pot, and you have a nice, beautiful cup of coffee in the morning. And I drink 1 cup of coffee usually every morning because it's actually good for you. Now picture that same coffee filter, and now you take an ice pick and you punch a lot of holes in it, and then you pour the coffee in there. And then what happens is you have coffee grounds in your coffee. That is the worst coffee ever. That's similar to what's happening in our gut when we have leaky gut. A lot of people think leaky gut, oh, I need a Depends. No, it's not that kind of leaky gut where you need a Depends. It's a leaky gut where literally the semi-permeable membrane of the small intestine has lost its barrier function, and just like our southern border, it's letting all these terrorists in. That's what's going on. But the terrorists and what's disrupting this border are a lot of the medicines we're giving, antibiotics, anti-inflammatory meds, proton pump inhibitors, turning off the acid, are creating lots of bad bacteria forming the small intestines where the bad bacteria doesn't belong. They don't belong anywhere in the body, but especially not in the small intestines, because then you get all this bloating and gas. They have this horrible, stinky methane gas.
So how are they poking holes? So these antibiotics and these medications are poking holes in the lining of the gut.
Well, what's happening, again, when you take an anti-inflammatory medicine, literally it's like dropping a crater bomb in your GI tract where it opens it up. And also the antibiotics, when you take antibiotics, it kills those good bacteria. That's job is to help maintain the integrity of the brush border of your small intestine.
So now it's allowing all those complex carbs and those large fats.
Exactly.
Inside
and big peptides. Yes. Peptides. Creating tremendous inflammation in the body.
Okay.
And setting the stage for autoimmune disease. Now, we've talked about the medicines that do it. Let's talk about the foods that do it. Now, also you say, well, is there a test that tests that? Yes, there's a Cyrex array intestinal antigen permeability screening. Is from this test that we do. They literally check for leaky gut. They check the actinomycin and a gluten. See, these are two proteins that literally maintain the tight junctions of the cells, keep them from opening up. So we check the actinomycin, the gluten, and the zonulin. These are two proteins that maintain the tight junctions. So when these are elevated, they check the gluten, zonulin, IgA, IgG, and IgM. When that's high, you got leaky gut. And they also do the LPS. So we have a way to tell. But I usually don't have to do that because I can usually tell. If they're having these symptoms, I just start repairing it. I'm going to tell you how to repair it in just a bit.
Right.
So we got to identify leaky gut and treat it. We're going to tell you how to treat it a little later on. But also we talked about low vitamin D levels. That's critically important. That's a major trigger for autoimmune disease. You want to get that vitamin D up. Vitamin D is dirt cheap. How much do you need? Get your vitamin D level checked. It should be 50 to 80 nanograms per ml. Most people are only 30 or less. And so I personally take 5,000 units a day. Now, again, you say, but I'm taking vitamin D in my vitamin. All you're getting in your vitamins usually 400 units. That's it.
Now, how much vitamin D do you get when you're in sunlight? Let's say you're in your bathing suit, fully exposed to
the sun.
You're
getting, in 15 minutes, you can get like 5,000 to 10,000 units.
Okay. So 15 minutes of full body exposure with a bathing suit on.
And that you'll be getting plenty. And a lot of my patients, what I have them do, they take higher amounts of vitamin D in the winter, half the dose in the summer. So my patients during the winter may take 5,000 units in the summer, 1,000 or 2,000 units. That's a good way to do it. Okay. Now, the food. This is the kryptonite. These are the foods that create leaky gut for most everyone. The number one food that does it, can you guess what it is? What is the number one kryptonite food? Gluten is the number one kryptonite food creating leaky gut and creating autoimmune disease. If you want to get over autoimmune disease, you're going to have to lay certain foods on the altar.
And gluten is in almost every packaged product, isn't it?
When I saw this back in the early 1990, 1991, there were hardly any restaurants that were gluten-free. And your mom would go crazy because she got tired of cooking. She'd want to go out. And I said, I can't eat bread. I can't eat pasta. I can't eat crackers. I can't eat bagels. I can't eat rolls. And your mom's a bread lover. And she would say, I don't want to go with you. You're no fun. So I had to start just eating mainly vegetables. And that's how I came up with the keto program, because keto is real friendly, but the gut zone program's even friendlier for
Well, you would have your own gluten-free pasta.
Yes,
That you would go to restaurants and you'd give it to the chef in the back
You're right.
to cook what's on the menu, but with your pasta.
I did this
I remember.
for so many years in the 90s. And finally, they came up with a gluten-free pasta. They say, you don't have to bring it anymore. We have our own gluten-free.
That was really nice of them.
I know. So I started a new trend back in the 90s, because I had my few restaurants. The ones that didn't have it, I'd have to bring my own. And I'd bring my own chips to a Mexican restaurant. I wouldn't eat there. So you remember that? How your mom would sneak it in with a
And they knew. They would show up there and you could tell they were used to that. So.
Okay, but this is the kryptonite. And gluten is found in 3 key foods. You know what those foods are?
Oh, bread.
Yeah,
pasta,
but wheat, barley, and rye. Those are your 3 gluten foods. Now, wheat is used to make bread and pasta and rolls and biscuits and bagels and pretzels and most cereals, okay? Barley, we don't eat much barley. Now, back in Jesus' day, they ate more barley bread back then than they ate wheat bread. Now, barley has less gluten in it. And you say, well, why is it that they ate more barley back then in Jesus' day? Because barley was 1/3 of the cost of wheat back in the biblical days.
So gluten is formed in these. I don't know why I thought that they were man-made. So gluten actually is formed through.
Now, let me explain what's happened.
Okay.
Let me explain. Why is gluten? Okay. Why is it that Jesus taught us to pray, give us this day our daily bread? Yet nowadays, gluten is so inflammatory that I tell most of my patients to stop eating it. Now, why is that? Well, because we have crossbred and hybridized our wheat, so no longer is it the tall amber waves of beautiful grain. It's the little dwarf wheat, the short, stubby, ugly dwarf wheat that's highly inflammatory with over 23,788 different proteins, any one of which can create inflammation. We have created a tremendous inflammatory wheat to mass feed the people that resist drought. That's what's happened.
Sure.
So we've done it to ourselves. Now, when you go to Europe, not so. So many of my patients go to Europe and they say, where does this thing happen? I went to Italy, I went to France, I went to Germany, I went to Greece. I can eat their bread. I have no problem. I can eat their pasta. No problem. That's because their gluten is not the same as here. They don't have near their bread. They don't have near the gluten content that we have here. They don't have the degree of inflammatory gluten content that we have here.
Does it just preserve the food longer?
Gluten is what is the gluten that makes the bread stick together. And gluten is a protein in bread that gives the bread the consistency that it has. But you can get almost a similar thing, like I say, with rice bread with no gluten.
So the industries like the consistency of the product.
It's dirt cheap.
There you go. That makes sense.
It's
why they're pushing so much of it.
It's just highly inflammatory. If you have an autoimmune disease, you need to lay the gluten on the altar. And then once your gut heals, you can have bread such as sourdough on occasion. It won't hurt you usually. And what I do is I can have sourdough bread. I toast it, but I get that fermented sourdough, and literally that takes most all the gluten out of it.
Fermented sourdough?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And what I do is I put my high polyphenol olive oil on. I don't use butter. Butter is going to damage your gut, see? And it's going to increase your lipopolysaccharides. It damages the gut.
Butter will damage the gut?
Yes, it will. But not so with this high polyphenol olive oil. I call it one of the gut power tools. It starts to heal your gut. So I use tons of olive oil since I was in Greece back about 6-7 years ago. I've been using tons of olive oil because the Greek people are some of the longest lived people, some of the healthiest people, even though back when I was there, about 50 to 60% smoke. Now it's down to about 30%. But there's so many people in Greece, they don't get the cancer that we get, yet they smoke much more than we do. And on the Isle of Icaria, that's a blue zone where people live to be commonly over 100 years of age.
It's amazing.
So that's because they eat a lot of olive oil, a lot of fruits, veggies, not so much meat. And if they eat cheese, you know what they eat? Feta cheese.
Oh, feta.
Or goat cheese or sheep cheese. Yeah. They don't eat our inflammatory cow cheese. Cow cheese is inflammatory. So we're talking about foods that literally create inflammation in the gut. And gluten is number one. Realize that gluten also, we are seeing an exponential rise in celiac disease. Celiac disease is an autoimmune disease where the body starts to destroy the small intestines. And these people lose weight. I've had so many celiac patients, they lose weight, they have malabsorption, they lose muscle, they're more prone to lymphomas and certain cancers, and it is increasing exponentially. If you have celiac, most doctors miss it, but listen to the stats. 1 in 133 Americans, or 1% of the population, have celiac disease. Celiac disease is increasing with an average of 7.5% per year over the past several decades. That's how much this is increasing, mainly because of this inflammatory wheat we're eating.
Now, what's the difference between celiac disease and ulcerative colitis and Crohn's? Because they're all similar in how
Well, good question.
manifest.
Celiac disease is a true autoimmune disease and allergy to wheat, the gluten in wheat, and it'll kill you.
So
And so it is
for wheat,
life-threatening.
with
wheat.
Crohn's and ulcerative
Crohn's and ulcerative colitis
a lot of things.
is an autoimmune disease. Crohn's is of the terminal ileum and usually the rectum, whereas ulcerative colitis is the entire colon. It creates tremendous inflammation.
Okay.
But celiac can actually kill you. And so you've got to avoid wheat for the rest of your life, all wheat. It's that serious. So you have to make sure there is no wheat in anything you eat.
Zero.
Now you say, how do I know if I have celiac?
Sure.
Simple test. I do it all the time.
They have a celiac test.
Well, it's called the tissue transglutaminase IgA level. That is the confirmatory test for celiac disease, and it's a simple blood test.
Okay.
And I do it in my office all the time.
It's great that we can at least identify.
Yes, we can identify it. So
You don't have to guess.
So if you are concerned you have celiac, if you're losing weight, if you have diarrhea after you eat wheat, you lost a lot of weight, you just are melting away, and you say, I don't know what's going on. I'm eating, but I'm losing weight, and your tummy's always bloated and swollen. Get the test for celiac disease. That's a tissue transglutaminase IgA.
And not a lot of people know you can actually go to your doctor and request these tests.
You can.
So you don't have to go, well, let me hope that my doctor will recommend this.
They
if I
won't.
ask them.
They
You
miss
actually
it
have
so
to
much.
go and say, hey, I'd like to request this particular blood test.
And I run this on a lot of my patients. And you say, well, what if they're not skinny, but I'm still having all these gut issues? I've had people that are obese with celiac disease.
Oh, interesting.
So again, if you're having all those gut issues, please get checked, because if you have celiac, literally gluten can kill you. So it's critical to know that.
Okay.
And they have joint pains usually too. When they have celiac disease, they're extremely fatigued. So if that's you, please get checked. Real important. Oh, there's one other. Gluten can also trigger another autoimmune skin disease called dermatitis herpetiformis, which is similar to psoriasis. It causes an itching, blistering, burning rash.
Ooh.
And it's more common in males than females.
Sounds painful.
But those are people that usually are real sensitive to gluten. That's due to gluten. So if you're having that pimply type rash, like little herpes, that's forming on your skin, blistering, just burning rash, and it's real itchy, that's many times dermatitis herpetiformis. When you get off gluten, it goes away.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Gluten is the source of so many problems. I always
and
thought
your doctors miss it. No, gluten is the worst. It's the most inflammatory food, I believe, on the planet.
wow. You would put it higher than sugar or trans fatty acids.
It's the worst. It's the worst. Now, the second food behind gluten would probably be nightshades. And they belong to the Solanaceae family. They include, like we talked about, tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, eggplant, paprika. And that's because they have these lectins in the skin, and they're like gut bombs. They start to damage the gut. They start to create. Now, people that are sensitive to nightshades generally have pain in the fingers. And when I see a person with all these knots on these DIP joints, distal interphalangeal joints, they have knots and arthritis here and on their thumb. I said, oh, I see, you're tomato, pepper, paprika lover, and cheese will do it too. Now, if they have just arthritis in their thumbs, it's coffee. They're drinking too much coffee.
You're kidding.
And so I say, cut back just 1 cup of coffee a day. If you drink over 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day, you get pain in your thumbs. That's inflammation due to the coffee bean. It causes inflammation in the thumb.
You can identify it that
Absolutely, that easy.
that
I
consistent.
see it all the time.
Well, I remember we used to have greens that had some peppers in it years ago.
And we
had
take 'em
greens
out.
powder. We took them out. And a lot of people take a greens powder that has peppers.
Right.
It's very common. It shocked me when I learned all this.
And nightshades are so bad, I took it out of our Green Supreme food. It has all the healthy veggies that are fermented and the grasses that are real good. And the
doesn't have any nightshades.
Right, no nightshades, which is huge. The other food that's highly inflammatory for your gut is dairy. Now, especially it's the casein A1 in the dairy. So it's found in yogurt. But people say, but I eat yogurt, but I eat kefir, but I eat cheese. Highly inflammatory because of the casein A1. Not so with feta cheese, which is 70% sheep, 30% goat, or goat cheese, or sheep cheese. Or the new cheese is casein A2 cheese, just like casein A2 milk. So if you're a milk lover, you can get casein A2 cheese or casein A2 milk, but in moderation. Don't go overboard.
That's still from a cow.
Still from a cow. But see, the cow's milk has two proteins primarily, well, also whey, two forms of casein. Casein A1, which is highly inflammatory to most people, especially your sinuses. It creates the mucus. It creates the inflammation usually in the body and in the joints. And there's casein A2 that does not create near as much mucus or does not create near as much inflammation. So it's, cow's milk is high in both, but there's certain cows that are high in A2 and no A1.
You could see in the stores for our boys, we buy the A2 milk.
And that's good.
It came out of nowhere, though.
I know, but see, just the goat milk would have that. But now, certain cow's milk, but it's expensive. But now it's even at Walmart. So I get it for the boys at Walmart, and they do good with it.
Well, if we get loud enough, they'll start carrying it. That's the
No, they carry it at Walmart.
Well, that's what I mean. It sounds like, the people are demanding new, better products.
Right. And remember, I was a cheese lover. Cheese caused a lot of my sinus problems. When I gave cheese up, guess what? Sinus infections went away.
Wow.
So again, if you're a cheese lover, switch it either to the feta, the goat, the sheep, or the casein A2 cheese. Where do you get it? Whole Foods.
Whole Foods has it.
Okay, right. Okay, so those are the main foods. Now, the last one, we're not going to have time. We're out of time already.
We're out of time.
We're going to talk about stress is the next major trigger of autoimmune disease. Stress is huge, but we're out of time. We need to kind of wrap it up and go over some things that'll help their gut.
Well, we have to go over this emotional component on the next show. And so stay connected to us. If you want to support this program, please look at Dr. Colbert's books. He's got the Healthy Gut Zone. He also has a line of nutritional products.
We have a gut package too. The most important would be the probiotic. This has 16 billion colony-forming units of Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus coagulans, Lactobacillus plantarum, Bifidobacteria lactis, Bifidobacteria brevis. It also has the fructooligosaccharides and galactooligosaccharides that feed the good bacteria. So again, that's a great supplement for the gut. 1 or 2 in the morning, and then our collagen, full of glutamine that helps heal the gut, usually a scoop 3 times a day or more. And then our fiber. Now, some people can't have fiber. This is a wonderful psyllium husk with prebiotics. And this, I love it. I take a scoop twice a day. I never go away without it. And it helps tremendously to help support a healthy gut. Unless you have ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. I don't let those patients do it. If so, just start a little teeny amount. And certain patients with IBS can't take it either.
Okay, if you are interested in any of these nutritional products, you can go to shop.drcolbert.com. They are also all offered on Amazon. This is Dr. Colbert's broadcast. Thanks, Dad. It was a great show. We'll see you guys next time.
God bless you.